Hello once again, I'm back talking about Starfield. Yeah, I know, we're really kind of continuing with this old horse at this point, but I wanted to talk about an article I saw online from Eurogamer that said Bethesda nerfed the hell out of Starfield's planet atmosphere effects. They're originally very punitive. And I wanted to kind of just talk about this and my thoughts, because I've really been railing in Starfield mainly about the exploration effects and just kind of how boring and droll they felt in comparison to something like No Man's Sky, which whilst wasn't the most interesting, it just did it better. Like flat out, it did it better in pretty much every way, and that's been something that I feel like the community in general has repeated, so it's not just me in that sense. But I wanted to quote Todd Howard in the article, where he says essentially, the way environmental damage works in the game on planets and your suit is that you have resistances to certain types of atmosphere effects, whether that's radiation or thermal, etc. And that was a pretty complex system. Actually, it was very punitive, Howard revealed. And so we kept trying, where you get these afflictions, and we kept tuning it, and what we did at the end of the day, it was a very complicated system for players to understand it, and we just nerfed the hell out of it. Planetary conditions will still pop on the screen, but their effects are very minimal, and by design. This is by design. You know, it was more about flavour than general risk on the players. We want it to, in the end, kind of only matter a little bit. It matters more in flavour. The affliction you get is more annoying and knowing you have it than the actual game result. I'm generalising. So I read this and I just couldn't help but feel like this really said a lot about Starfield and the direction the game went. In that Starfield is a game that really was advertised, really felt like it was about like the science, the realism, the NASA punk that they kept reiterating. And it continually feels like they just kind of dumbed it down, and made everything a bit arcadey, boring, not exactly the game that they had advertised. You know, in this article and others that I've read, they even talk about the travel in space and how it was influenced from FTL, which is a literal arcade game essentially, like very fun indie game, one of my favourite indie games of all time, but it's not an RPG kind of big space sim system. It's a very simple space combat game. It's about managing your crew and the systems and how that works. You know, and then mentioning MechWarrior in terms of like how you manage the general systems in that game, which again is just a poor comparison, because MechWarrior and the way you move, the way your weapon systems work, is completely different from how Starfield's weapon systems work. Starfield's weapon systems don't have some kind of overheat system. There's no real variety in the weapons. It's essentially like a point and click, 2 to maybe 3 if you're lucky weapon systems, depending on how you've made your ship. Whereas in MechWarrior, you could have a list of 8 to 10 weapons on 4 to 5 different hotkeys. You'll use them, or you use them all at once in an alpha strike. You know, these aren't options in Starfield. There isn't the same level of depth. And to say that you borrowed from these systems in FTL, the MechWarrior, as influence, and then end up with what you did, it really feels like you failed in that regard. I will say that in the article, Howard does go on and say that they're interested in coming back to this, maybe in the future, probably as like a New Game Plus thing maybe, or some kind of additional challenge, maybe a bit like the, was it Frostfall in Skyrim that had the kind of the weather effects and the sleep and that kind of survival mode kind of thing, maybe that for Starfield I could see happening. But it's a bit disappointing that, again, it's like something that this really felt like it was in the advertisements of this game, and it's just another point of like, why was this game advertised like this? Why did it feel like exploration was a big part of it? You know, managing your ship, when it really just kind of feels like Fallout in space with a Skyrim main story. It's I don't want to whine, and I have in some regards in some videos, but it's a disappointment. It really is. You know, there are systems and ways that this could have been done where the game just would have been more fun. You know, if planets had really hostile environments, I do think that making it more mandatory in how you use your ship or how you use your spacesuits would have felt better, because as it is, I really don't care half the time about spacesuits, you know, radiation, thermal, all that kind of stuff. It rarely comes up in a way that I care. Most of the time I just look at the armour and go, okay, good armour, good energy resist or something, that'll do. That'll get me past the enemies I'm fighting currently, and that's all I need. Or half the time I might end up being, this just looks better, so I'm going to take it for cosmetics. And I think that early on I was keeping stuff for, oh, this has better radiation, this has better thermal, this has better armour, and I'll keep different sets on my ship that I can swap in and out of. But the moment I went onto a planet where the oxygen was an issue and the radiation was bad, and I just kind of went, oh, I'm not dying. I'm getting like a debuff that's reducing my health, a bit like Fallout 4 radiation, but it doesn't actually matter. Like, in the same way that the mass doesn't really matter. There's no punishing effect. I can just keep going. It's fine. And I just ultimately come down to, like, wouldn't this game be better if there was more to the planetary effects, if there was more to gravity, if there was more to the alien life? Everything just feels very basic. I mean, my first, I want to say 10 hours or so of Starfield were me initially playing the story and then spending a bunch of time on planetary exploration, looking at the different planets, looking at the different animals, and creating my outpost. And then I just kind of realised there wasn't a point. There was nothing to it. Everything was very lonely. The animals were very samey. They all kind of reacted the same way. They were either aggressive or not aggressive. Sure, some of them were cool. It looked nice, and there were planets where I deliberately built an outpost on them because I thought, oh, the wildlife and the environment looks nice. I wanna have my outpost base and look out the window and I see the creatures. But I started doing that and then kind of realised, why am I doing this? There's nothing to it. It really doesn't feel like there's anything, like there's no kind of like ranch system, there's no reason for me to be doing this. I can't have my own like spaceports with people coming in and out or resting there, you know. These systems all feel half-baked. That's like the most annoying thing. It's frustrating because it really feels like RPGs recently have been kind of pushing forward to having more complex systems again, or having games where they were a bit more believing in the intellect of the audience playing them. And then we get like the most popular RPG, which, yes, I know Bethesda isn't exactly known, at least for a long time now, for making very technical systems. They've always been dumbing stuff down. Oblivion did it, Skyrim did it, the Fallouts have done it. But they said themselves, shortly before Starfield, they were interested in kind of pushing forward and going back to old systems, going back to more complex kind of D&D-like stuff. Things have a little bit more thought, a little bit more RPG. And then they do all of this and remove like the science of it, and it's just kind of like, man, what? Do you believe in this? You know, do you actually think that your players are dumb? Is that what it is? Because it comes across very foolish, very, I don't really care, you know. Is there no intern who was passionate about these systems and wanted to kind of spend their weekend really pushing, increasing the depth of these? Obviously, I know that these games are built by committee, but there are so many aspects to the exploration side of things, the planetary side of things, the star systems, where I go, this was a space game, man. This was a game about travel in space, about the new frontier. Everyone talks about that in game, exploring society that you're part of. And the main story half the time just goes on about some chosen one narrative. It's just, man. But I'm going on. I'm going on when I don't need to. But I'll bring the video to a close. I just wanted to kind of mention this article, which I really felt was indicative of just the direction that the RPG has gone, and how I really hope that it turns around in future updates, future DLCs. We'll see. But really starting to think that maybe it's going to soon be time for Todd Howard to move along and let someone else take over Bethesda. We'll see. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video, and goodbye for now. See ya.